In 1870, a 31-year-old bookkeeper from Cleveland started an oil refining company with $1 million. 30 years later, he controlled 90% of America's oil and had accumulated wealth equivalent to over $400 billion in today's money, making him the richest person in modern history. His company, Standard Oil, became so powerful that it took an act of Congress and a Supreme Court decision to break it apart. This is the story of how John D. Rockefeller built the world's first trillion-dollar company, monopolized an entire industry, and changed capitalism forever. To understand Standard Oil's rise, you need to understand just how chaotic the oil industry was in the 1860s. In 1859, Edwin Drake struck oil in Titusville, Pennsylvania, and suddenly everyone wanted a piece of the action. Within months, thousands of prospectors flooded into western Pennsylvania, drilling wells anywhere they could buy or lease land. Towns appeared overnight. Oil derricks sprouted like weeds. But here's the problem. Nobody knew what they were doing. The oil business was pure chaos. Prices swung wildly. Oil that sold for $10 a barrel one week might sell for 10 cents the next. Drillers would strike massive wells, flooding the market and crashing prices. Then wells would run dry, creating shortages and price spikes. Refineries went bankrupt by the hundreds. Fortunes were made and lost in days. John D. Rockefeller watched this chaos from Cleveland, where he ran a commodity trading business. And while everyone else saw disorder, Rockefeller saw opportunity, but not where everyone else was looking. See, most people thought the money was in drilling, finding oil in the ground. Rockefeller realized the real money was in refining, turning crude oil into kerosene, the fuel that lit America's lamps before electricity. In 1870, he founded Standard Oil with his brother William, Henry Flagler, and Samuel Andrews. They started with one refinery in Cleveland. Within a decade, they would control nearly every refinery in America. Rockefeller's strategy was brutally simple. Buy out your competitors, and if they won't sell, destroy them. But here's what made Rockefeller different from every other robber baron of his era. He was patient, methodical, and absolutely ruthless in his efficiency. First, he made his own refineries the most efficient in the world. While other refineries wasted byproducts, Standard Oil used everything. They sold gasoline, which most refineries burned off as waste. They made lubricating oil, paraffin wax, petroleum jelly, anything that could be extracted from a barrel of crude. This meant Standard Oil could make a profit even when competitors were losing money. Second, Rockefeller did something revolutionary. He cut a secret deal with the railroads. Here's how it worked. Railroads needed to ship oil, and Rockefeller promised them guaranteed high-volume business. In exchange, he got massive discounts, sometimes 50% off the standard shipping rates. But here's the truly diabolical part. Rockefeller negotiated drawbacks. This meant that not only did Standard Oil pay less to ship their oil, but the railroads also gave them a cut of what his competitors paid to ship theirs. Think about that. Every time a rival refinery shipped oil, they were literally funding their own destruction. With lower costs, Rockefeller could undercut any competitor on price. He'd enter a market and sell kerosene below cost until every independent refinery was bleeding money. Then he'd offer to buy them out. And here's where Rockefeller showed his genius for psychology. When he wanted to acquire a refinery, he wouldn't threaten. He'd simply present the mathematics. You're losing money at current prices. I can sustain these prices indefinitely. You cannot. Sell to me now while your refinery still has value, or go bankrupt and get nothing. More often than not, they sold. But Rockefeller didn't just buy refineries. He bought everything around them. He purchased forests to supply wood for barrels. He bought chemical companies that made acids used in refining. He built his own barrel-making factories. He created his own pipeline network. He even bought his own tank cars and ships. This is called vertical integration, and Rockefeller perfected it. By 1880, Standard Oil controlled roughly 90% of oil refining in the United States and was moving into distribution. Rockefeller owned the pipelines that moved oil from wells to refineries. He owned the tank cars that shipped refined products. He owned the distribution networks that sold kerosene to stores across America and Europe. There was just one problem. All of this was illegal. At the time, corporations could only operate in the state where they were chartered. Standard Oil was chartered in Ohio, which meant legally Rockefeller couldn't own refineries in Pennsylvania, New York, or any other state. So in 1882, Rockefeller's lawyers invented something new: the trust. Here's how it worked. All the various Standard Oil companies, and there were over 40 of them, transferred their stock to a board of 9 trustees. These trustees then issued trust certificates to the stockholders, giving them shares in the combined profits of all the companies. It was a legal fiction, but a brilliant one. Technically, Standard Oil wasn't one company. It was 40 independent companies that just happened to be controlled by the same 9 men. The Standard Oil Trust became the blueprint for every monopoly in America. U.S. Steel copied it. American Tobacco copied it. The Sugar Trust copied it. Within a decade, Trust controlled everything from whiskey to lead to cotton oil. By 1890, Standard Oil's market value was estimated at $70 million, about $2.3 billion today. But that dramatically understates the company's true power. Standard Oil controlled 90% of America's oil. They employed 100,000 people. They operated in dozens of countries. They had a larger budget than most governments. If Standard Oil existed today with the same market share, it would be worth over $1 trillion, making it the most valuable company on earth. John D. Rockefeller himself was worth roughly 1.5% of America's entire GDP. To put that in perspective, if someone had that same percentage of wealth today, they'd be worth over $400 billion, twice as rich as Elon Musk. But all that power came with a price. Everyone hated Standard Oil. Small businessmen hated them for crushing competition. Workers hated them for low wages and dangerous conditions. Consumers hated them because, despite efficiency gains, kerosene prices never seemed to drop much after competitors were eliminated. Journalists began investigating Standard Oil's practices, and what they found was damning: secret railroad rebates, predatory pricing, industrial espionage. Standard Oil even had spies in rival companies, reporting competitors' shipments and prices. In 1902, journalist Ida Tarbell published The History of the Standard Oil Company in McClure's magazine. Her father had been an independent oil producer, ruined by Rockefeller's railroad deals, and her 19-part exposé was devastating. She documented every dirty trick, every crushed competitor, every secret deal. The public was outraged. Politicians who'd been quietly taking Standard Oil money suddenly found it politically dangerous. President Theodore Roosevelt, the great Trustbuster, made breaking up monopolies his signature issue. In 1906, the federal government sued Standard Oil under the Sherman Antitrust Act, which had been passed in 1890 specifically to combat trusts like Rockefeller's. The trial revealed just how vast Standard Oil's empire had become. The company controlled 90% of oil refining, 85% of final sales of kerosene, most of the pipelines, most of the tank cars, and distribution networks across the globe. The evidence was overwhelming. In 1911, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil was an illegal monopoly and ordered it broken into 34 separate companies. Here's the crazy part. The breakup made Rockefeller even richer. Those 34 companies? They included names you definitely know: Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Amoco, Marathon, Conoco. Rockefeller owned shares in all of them, and once they were competing against each other, they became even more valuable. Within a few years of the breakup, Rockefeller's net worth had nearly doubled. Standard Oil's legacy is complicated. On one hand, Rockefeller's efficiency and organization transformed oil from a chaotic, boom and bust industry into a stable, modern business. His vertical integration and systematic management became the model for every major corporation in the 20th century. On the other hand, Standard Oil pioneered every anti-competitive practice that antitrust law was designed to prevent: predatory pricing, exclusive dealing, industrial espionage, secret cartels. The company showed exactly how a monopoly could strangle an entire industry and extract wealth from an entire nation. Standard Oil proved that in capitalism, efficiency and ruthlessness often go hand in hand. Rockefeller spent the last 40 years of his life giving away his fortune, over $500 million, or about $16 billion today. He funded the University of Chicago, created the Rockefeller Foundation, helped establish modern medical research, and eradicated hookworm in the American South. He died in 1937 at age 97, having lived long enough to see the automobile transform oil from a fuel for lamps into the lifeblood of modern civilization. Standard Oil had bet on the future of oil, and that future turned out to be bigger than anyone imagined. Today, the oil industry is worth over $4 trillion globally, and it all started with one man who understood that in business, controlling the market is more valuable than controlling the product. That's how Standard Oil became the world's first trillion-dollar company, not through innovation, but through domination. The 34 companies created from Standard Oil's breakup would recombine over the decades through mergers. Today, ExxonMobil, Chevron, and BP all trace their roots directly back to Rockefeller's empire.